Hi, this is Jolynn Philbrick, and welcome to Inner Abundant Mindset. And we have another wonderful show. And today, our expert is going to be talking to us about emotional wounds and traumas and what they have to do with our finances and prosperity and our abundant mindset. So, this is going to be a fascinating show. So, you definitely want to stick around to the end to hear all her juicy gossip. So let me tell you a little about her. This is Dr. Michelle Pedicolis, and she's a national speaker and expert on the emotional wounding and unresolved grief. She has a PhD in, let's see if I can get this word right, so give me a minute, sociology, and 18 years of coaching. She produced the simple word, can't get it right. She produced the award-winning 3-part documentary series, Secrets of Life and Death, and is a featured author in the soon-to-be-released anthology, Breaking Barriers. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Jolynn. It's my pleasure to join you.
Well, I'm excited. When is your book going to be coming out?
I thought it was going to be coming out this month. I haven't heard anything more from Jim Chong, who is organizing it, but it was supposed to come out sometime this month. So we'll see. There have been a number of snags. He had problems with his aging father, which I totally understand because I help
Yeah.
with people around caregiving and grief and loss. So I am totally tolerant, and it will come out when it's supposed to come out.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it. Now, I noticed that you deal with wounds and grief and things to this effect. Now, did something happen in your life that made you want to go into this arena?
Well, yes, something did happen, and the the main thing that happened is that my parents died about 6 months apart,
Mm.
and that stimulated the my decision to make a documentary. But the earlier part of the story is that when they died, I was totally unprepared. I was
Mm.
not prepared emotionally, and it just broke me open. And this was key because at the age of 2, I decided not to feel my feelings. It was not anything earth shaking. It's just that I didn't bond with my mother. I bonded with my father. My
Uh-huh.
mother already had 2 daughters, and so I was kind of like over the top. And my father, when I was 2, he was transferred to Japan. He was in the military. And, in a 2-year-old's mind, this was devastating. And I
Yeah.
decided that I didn't want to feel my feelings. I decided that I was um, unworthy of love. And I decided that the solution for that was to become a people pleaser. So I didn't even know what kind of things I wanted. I only knew, and I got very good at sussing out what other people wanted. I did really well in school, National Honor Society, Phi Beta Kappa in college, one of 2 graduate students in my class to get the PhD.
Wow.
And then I got into the real world. I got my first teaching job at a small college in Minnesota, and I did all my people pleasing, joined all the faculty committees, taught new classes, night classes, adult classes, took education or teacher training. I even coached the women's cross country team.
Oh, wow.
And you know what? My students needed me to lead. And all I knew how to
Oh,
do was please. So
yeah.
I lost that job. I was
Wow.
devastated.
I
I
bet.
was devastated because my plan didn't work anymore. It worked really well when I was young, but suddenly it didn't work. So I tapped myself down and I only took jobs with bosses, employers that wanted me more than I really needed them. So I
Mm.
um, dimmed my intelligence, I dimmed my education, I dimmed down my brilliance. And that went along. It's short. So that went on for a while. And then my husband, my first husband, he left me. So
Ah,
there was that
no.
abandonment issue again. And I joined a spiritual group because relationships didn't matter. So, see, I didn't have to worry about getting rejected. Fortunately, this was a spiritual group. It helped me open up my heart again and actually helped me reconnect with my spirituality and my brilliance.
Mm,
And after that, I realized that I needed some help because I met my current husband, and I thought, you know what? Okay, my heart's open, but there's some really bad habits here, and I just knew I could see it.
yeah.
So I decided to do some very early childhood wounding work. And just as I finished that, my parents started dying. First, my father from Alzheimer's, and then my mother. And so now, all those years in practice of tamping down my feelings, wide open. I was
Wow.
blown away. Had arguments with my sisters, cried, and then I decided to get curious. I said, whoa, this is pretty intense. What's this about? And that's when I decided I had been working in TV, community access television. And I said, well, I need to make a documentary. And this seems like a really good subject. And it was. I worked on it for a long time. And it ended
Yeah.
up being 3 films.
Wow. Well, it sounds like in your story, you had your first original heartache when you were 2.
Yes.
Then you had another heartache and another heartache. So you kept having heartache on top of heartaches
Yes.
and some disappointments. And
Yes.
it wasn't until it sounded like to me that when your parents passed, you really had to deal with all the stuff that you
And
shoved down.
yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And you can see how it also kept me down. I mean, I was doing temp work and all kinds of stuff I had a PhD and I'm doing temp work. What?
yeah, because your value and worth has been put down.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. Now, I did interview somebody recently that called it the please me disease. And what I found interesting in this interview was she stated that if we don't have our own value system, that we don't have boundaries because we don't put or have values to recognize boundaries. And I never put values and boundaries together. I thought,
So that's interesting. Say a little bit more about that. I don't quite get that.
isn't it? Okay, so in her episode, she was taken to a Middle Eastern country and lived there for 25 years, raised her daughter, and the
Uh-huh.
husband
Okay.
was abusive. So she learned that she wanted kindness. So her value is kindness. And
Mm.
so, for an example, I'm using my language. I don't know if she did this or not, but for me, I would say, is that person talking nice to me? Yes or no? And I'd make the decision. And then if they were not talking nice, I'd go, oh, I need to set a boundary. Excuse me, that wasn't nice what you said.
Oh,
Or
well,
if,
that's good. That
yeah,
works really well. Yes.
yeah. Or if they're talking nice, you go, wow, I really appreciate what you said. Thank you very much. And you compliment them and praise them.
Right.
So I'm just using that as an example.
Well, that's a good example. Yes.
Yes. And what was really interesting was I am a little bit like you. I have this please me disease. And when I had that conversation, I thought, wow, all I have to do is pick some values, what are important to me, and then check my boundaries. And then I can progress further in life and, you know, move forward with ease.
Nice.
So we kind of got off topic here. So if we're talking about you and your
Yes.
wounds and
Yes.
this trauma, how does that relate? Because I noticed you said you were doing different jobs and prosperity. How was your prosperity in this time? And how does our emotional wounds affect our prosperity?
Well, I was living, um, I was always making enough money to make my ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was very involved in that spiritual group. So I would work part time at temp jobs, and then I would go off and work at the spiritual group. I mean, I would live at this spiritual group, and I would, I just loved it. It really boosted my brilliance. It boosted my spirituality. But what I have found is that you need three things all working together.
Like a stool has three
Yes,
legs.
that's right. Or a
Yeah.
triangle. So it does. It has three legs. So one of them is that spirituality, that brilliance, that divine gift that we come into the world with. And
Yes.
that's what got tamped down in me when I
Um,
was younger. Two, you need to have body on board, because if body is in fear mode, then all those old habits will come up, and that was what had happened to me, was that I was afraid of being rejected, so I tamped myself down. So now I had body and brilliance working great together. I was doing all this spirituality, but I had not gotten brain involved. So it's brilliance, body, and the brain. And the brain takes the brilliance of our gifts and figures out how to create in the world, in this three-dimensional world. So you need all three to work together. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So, how do you get your brain on board? Because now you're in your subconscious mind where
Yes,
you put all these beliefs,
yes.
and sometimes we're not even aware we're running on
That's right.
autopilot.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
how do you get your brain on board?
Well, when we have that early childhood wound, not only does the body go into fear, but the brain comes up with themes and plans and patterns to help protect the body, right? The
Yes.
body does not want to be rejected. So the brain comes up with ideas like, oh, we'll only take jobs in which people want us more than we want them. So we want to change the programming of the brain. What I found, though, is you cannot change the programming of the brain if the body is in fear. So you always have to release the emotions before you can input new information.
Yes, that is so true. There was a time in my life where I kept waking up with panic attacks
Yeah.
because I was stepping into something new
Yes.
or there's some
Yes.
growth or something.
Yes.
I
Yes.
just remember like waking up all stressed. Somebody told me I was having a panic attack. I didn't even know what they were. Anyhow, I like, oh my goodness, I can't have this. So I worked on releasing the fear. I worked on safety. And then I worked on my mindset and
Yes.
my body.
Yes. Yes.
So, do you have a tip that you can help our listeners if they're, let's say, they're really stuck in fear and their body's frozen? Because if they take on this belief when they're little, I know when I was growing up, I'm fear based because of things that happened. I freeze. So let's use me as an example since I'm talking. No. So anyhow, if I'm in this frozen state, how do I get out of it and how do I move through it?
Well, freezing, of course, is one of the basic survival responses of the body: fight, flee, and freeze. So you're in one of them. So what you want to do is release the emotion. How do you, if you're in frozen mode, you might not even be aware of your emotion. And that was part of my problem, was that I didn't even have, I mean, I was up here and then I went up into the ether when I was in the spirituality. I had no sense of the feelings. So I recommend that you breathe and you go inside and you start to get to know your body and start to learn the language of the body. And then you will begin to be aware of where in your body you're holding your emotions, and you
Mm.
start to ease that up. When I was starting to do this work, I, of course, discovered that I was, like existing from the neck up. And I read a book which talked about massaging your body every day with oil.
Oh,
And so I started massaging my body, and I do this every day to stimulate the nerve endings so that I would start to develop an awareness of my body. Because, if you're used to not feeling your body, You don't feel it.
So would this be like putting lotion on your body? Is
Yes.
that the same idea?
Yes, that's right.
That
I
means I'd
actually,
have to give myself more time in the morning.
you got it. Yes, and pleasure. Yes,
Oh my
you
goodness.
please your body.
10
Oh,
minutes. Yeah. Another 10 minutes to massage. Oh, now when we
massage.
massage ourselves, what do we say to ourselves?
I love you. Oh, I love you. Oh, this
Oh,
feels so good. And to get into the sensation of it,
uh-huh.
so that you really take it in. So that really changed me, was uh, changed, brought me my consciousness out of the head and the ether and back into my body. So I'm much more aware of my body. Of course, yoga is also another really good way to get in your body, but it depends on what kind of yoga you do. Some
Yeah.
of these yogas are kind of like macho yoga, right? How
Yeah.
good you can do um, triangle pose or downward dog. But if you have a really good yoga teacher, they teach you how to get inside your body so you really feel the
Oh.
muscles. So that really helps. So you start to learn to listen to your body and feel inside, and that's when you can get in touch with the emotions. When you're frozen, the other thing you can do is you can trigger a full-blown panic attack. You can do something that scares the daylights out of you.
Oh,
And then,
skydiving.
yeah, well, I mean, you want to do something that is relevant, but you do something and it scares, and then you have the sensation, and then you can go into the feeling. And as soon as you have the feeling, you can stop whatever it is you're doing and just go into the feeling.
One time, well, let me go back a little bit. When I first started with Toastmasters, I would get up to the podium and I literally would shake. And it was a lunch crowd, so I could never eat lunch, and I'd always take my lunch home. And about an hour later, I'd relax and maybe eat lunch. So then later on in my speaking career, one time I got up on the stage and I was really afraid. And I looked at the audience and I go, wow, I'm really not afraid. I'm excited. And I did not know fear and excitement are the same energy,
Yes, they are.
because my body was shaking, but this time it was shaking out of excitement
Excitement. Yes.
instead of
So
fear.
that's the other tip, is that you start to reframe or reinterpret the story. So you can do that. Sometimes when your heart is hurting, you can think, "Oh, my heart is expanding." And it is so full of love that it's like bursting, and that's why it hurts.
Oh,
So
that's
I
good.
do that a lot with people who are working around grief and loss, is that they'll feel this and I'll say, that's just your love. It's okay. Let that happen. And the
Right.
tears, that's just an expression of your love. Let it happen.
And this is true. I was at a spiritual retreat one time, and they had walked us through this process, and I felt unconditional love for the very first time, like spirit unconditional love.
Hmm.
And I literally broke down and cried, and my heart was so full of love.
Yes,
So this, I
absolutely.
agree with you. i
Absolutely.
I've experienced that. That is a very good point. So if somebody's really lonely and they're feeling left out or deprived, they could put their hands on their heart and just practice loving themselves,
That's right.
right?
That's absolutely right. And what I found is interesting is the more you love yourself, the more you attract other people. But it has to come with you first. If you don't
Yes.
love yourself, nobody else is going to love you, believe me.
I know. That's so fun. I mean, so true. So, what I'm kind of curious. We've been talking about love and things to this effect, but what does an abundant mindset mean to you?
So, an abundant mindset means to me connecting with that brilliance that we come down to the world in. When we are in that connection with our spiritual or God self, divine, higher mind, that's when we're in that abundance mindset. And that's when the world flows. That's what Abraham or Esther Hicks talks about as the vortex. And I have a great story. I don't know if we have time for this story, but I have a great story about how that worked.
Okay.
Do we have time? I'll try
Yeah.
and keep it a little short.
Okay.
So after my first summer at the spiritual retreat, I was there for 2 months and I was higher than a kite. And I was in the vortex, but I didn't know it.
Ah.
We had 2 days off before we went into an extension. I actually stayed for another month. And I took a group of German Sufi students, that was the spiritual practice Sufi, with me in my VW van. We were going to go off to a Native American dance at a pueblo called Acoma, Sky City. So we stop in Albuquerque on the way, because this is out in New Mexico, and to pick up another student. And my car doesn't start. It won't
Oh.
start again. And I'm like, I'm ready to like have a meltdown, usual reaction to your car doesn't work, cry, gnashing of teeth. And I realized that I was in such a high state that that didn't feel right. So
Oh.
I just swallowed, felt the divine presence, and pulled out my idiot manual and diagnosed what was wrong with the car. And as I figured out what was wrong with the car, a man shows up at my shoulder and he says, "May I help you?" And I
Yes.
laughed and I said, "Well, only if you're a VW mechanic." And he said, "Well, actually I am."
Oh, isn't that lovely?
So I said, "Oh, well, do you happen to have this part?" He says, "I don't know, but let me check in my studio." And he goes into his garage and he comes out with a part. I mean, this is not something you would normally have on your shelf, right? And he had it and he put it in for me and he charged me $5.
Oh my goodness.
And
Meant to be.
oh my gosh. So I drove away, and as I reached the highway, I realized it was Labor Day. None of the shops were open in Albuquerque.
Oh, isn't that nice?
And I felt that in that moment that I made the decision to stay in the flow, the
Yes.
universe opened. It was
Yes.
like holding its breath until I made my decision.
I love that. I mean, isn't that amazing how when you're ready, whatever you need appears?
Yes,
That's
that's
fabulous. I
that's right.
love that story.
Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been so much fun. I wish I could hear more stories, but I'm sure our listeners would love to know how they could find you. And do you have a free gift for them?
I do. I do. So the first thing is they can find me at secretsoflifeanddeath.com. And that's all spelled out. There's no like symbol for and. It's spelled out and it's secrets plural. So secretsoflifeanddeath.com. That's my website. Now, if you want my free gift, the free gift is an audio recording. It's called Stress Release Body Scan. So this is a great
Ah,
recording for helping you get into your body. It talks you through, helps you identify where there may be tightness or holding, and actually talks you through how to release the energy. And
oh,
it's only like 13 minutes long. It works really well. And you can get that by going to uh, what is it called? Releaseandthrive.com. Release
.com.
and
Perfect.
Thrive. And it's also spelled out, releaseandthrive.com.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate this, Michelle. This has been so much fun. I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, you're so welcome, Jolynn. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on.
You're welcome. Okay. Bye.
Bye.